Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
You'll have to forgive the sparse set. I'm in the process of moving to a new location. My last studio is getting a little crowded. Not because of all the junk, just other stuff. Just bear with me. So I moved the desk, I moved the bookcase, and the stuff across the top, and I'll dust it and put it back, and pretty soon we'll be back to life as normal, at least as far as what's in front of this camera goes. Now, I'm probably going to regret doing this video, but I've gotten so many emails in the last 2 or 3 days and said, Steve, have you seen this crazy new law out of Michigan that makes it it's like a felony if you misuse the pronoun for somebody by accident? And I thought, well, that seems a little extreme, and I hadn't heard about this, but then I started noticing it popping up in all the really, really reliable places like, the Daily Mail. And the weird thing is that, number one, it's not a law. It is a proposed House bill. And second of all, it doesn't do what people keep saying that it does. And this is the scary part. So I understand that some people won't like what this bill does, but it does not do what people are saying in the news that it does. So if you're going to be upset by the law, at least be upset by the law as to what it actually says. So in case you're curious, I've seen headlines that say, in Michigan, it is now against the law to misuse someone's pronoun, and if you use the wrong pronoun, you're going to jail, you'll get fined $10,000. And that's not true. So here's what the law says. It's House Bill 4474, so it means it still has to get passed through the Senate, and then the governor would have to sign it. And of course, if the Senate passes a different version, it's got to get sent back. You know how that works, just a bill up on Capitol Hill. But what the bill does is it amends the section of the statute that has to do with hate crimes. Hate crimes. So there was already a law in Michigan that made ethnic intimidation illegal. Ethnic intimidation. So if you were to go up and intimidate somebody and do it to a certain extent, you could be found guilty of ethnic intimidation. And so what they've done is they've modified the law to simply include a few more groups of people. And instead of saying ethnic intimidation, they say that it is a hate crime. And yes, the groups that they've added have to do with transgender and other groups that use different pronouns that you might not have guessed. However, the word pronoun cannot be found in this bill. Just so you know, one of the first things I did is I word searched it. The word pronoun does not exist in this bill. So if you're going to tell me this bill outlawed the use of pronouns or misuse of pronouns, it would be pretty hard for it to do that since it doesn't mention them. It does not mention the word pronoun. So that's problem number one. However, it says, if this bill gets passed, a person is guilty of a hate crime if that person maliciously and intentionally does any of the following to an individual based in whole or in part on an actual or perceived characteristic of that individual listed under subsection 2, regardless of the existence of any other motivating factors. A, uses force or violence on another individual. It's got nothing to do with pronouns. Force or violence. B, causes bodily injury to another individual. Again, nothing to do with pronouns. C, intimidates another individual. Now, that could be the one that people are freaking out about, but you notice it doesn't say misuse of a pronoun. It says if you intimidate somebody else. D, damages, destroys, or defaces any real, personal, digital, or online property of another individual without the consent of that individual. So that couldn't be anything about pronouns. E, threatens by word or act to do any of the actions above. So the only thing it could possibly be is to intimidate another individual. And it says here that if you do that, then it could possibly be a hate crime, okay? Now, some people are going to say, what does intimidation mean? Maybe if somebody is accused of willfully and intentionally misusing pronouns, they could be charged with this law because they'd be intimidating them by willfully and intentionally misusing their pronouns. Well, the statute actually defines intimidate also. Isn't that helpful? Intimidate means a willful course of conduct involving repeated or continuing harassment of another individual that would cause a reasonable individual to feel terrorized, frightened, or threatened. So if you think that somebody accidentally misusing someone's pronoun is the equivalent of a willful course of conduct involving repeated or continuing harassment of another individual that would cause a reasonable individual to feel terrorized, frightened, or threatened, that's not quite what that says. But more importantly, it actually says, and that actually causes the victim to feel terrorized, frightened, or threatened. By the way, intimidate does not include constitutionally protected activity or conduct that serves a legitimate purpose. So if you accidentally use someone's pronouns, that would not qualify as intimidation under the definitions within this statute. Keep in mind that it says that you have to intentionally do any of the following to an individual based in whole or in part on an actual perceived characteristic. So simply misusing a pronoun would not be considered intimidating another individual. I know that I saw some people shrieking about this on one of the channels on the cable, and they were clearly exaggerating what this law actually says. And what's interesting is all the articles I saw about it in writing, none of them actually cited what the law actually said. They were all saying what they thought it said, but I'm not sure that anybody had actually read it. So it says the actual perceived characteristics of another individual include race or color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, physical or mental disability, age, ethnicity, and national origin, along with association or affiliation with an individual or group of individuals in whole or in part based on a characteristic described above. And so what they're getting at is that you cannot intimidate somebody if you do that maliciously and intentionally, and you cannot do that like this. So the best I think you could say with respect to pronouns is that if you were to maliciously and intentionally intimidate somebody by misusing their pronouns, but I don't know that that's intimidation. Intimidation generally sounds like you're threatening somebody. So that's what that's getting at. In case you're curious, there's more in the statute, and it simply says what happens to a person who violates Section 1, and if any of the following conditions apply, it could be, this, and the punishment's that, and the fine is that. If the violation results in a bodily injury, here's what can happen. And again, misusing someone's pronoun does not have anything to do with a bodily injury. So again, I know that there's going to be a lot of people out there and say, Steve, I think these kinds of laws are wrong. And you can feel that way. There were a lot of people who thought that the original hate crimes that were passed back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s were wrong also. But you do understand, I'm sure, that most people don't run up to somebody and start screaming and yelling and maliciously and intentionally attempting to intimidate them based on their race, their gender, their religion, their color, what groups they belong to. And that's generally not a good thing. And so I had some people say in one of the emails I got, somebody says, hey, Steve, this law would appear to be immediately a violation of the First Amendment. I've got the right to go up and say anything I want to anybody, including misusing the pronouns. And yes and no. There are some limits to free speech. We've all heard that you cannot yell fire in a crowded theater. You can't slander somebody. You can, but there's consequences if you do so. And so I know that many people get bent out of shape when they start thinking about this in terms of transgendered people or whatever. Think of it in terms of religion then instead, because it's just another class, right? So if you were to hear that somebody went up to somebody else on the street and started screaming and yelling at them because they were Jewish, you'd probably say, okay, that's not appropriate. And if the person was intentionally and maliciously intimidating them because they were Jewish, most people would say, okay, that's wrong. So I understand that nowadays it's a very touchy subject to talk about transgender situations or LGBTQ and all that stuff. I understand that. But I'm simply pointing out that all this statute did was take a law regarding, in essence, hate speech and add a few more classes to it. And so instead of just being based on religion, color, skin color, race, and things of that nature, now they've added in these other classes, including transgendered people or gay people. Okay? So the law does not outlaw the misuse of pronouns. And if you think that's what this does, you haven't read it. I would suggest that you read it. House Bill number 4474. In fact, I will put a link to the House bill in the description below the video. You can read it. You can show me where you found the word pronoun. So again, I'll probably be sorry I put up the video because I'm going to get so much feedback on this. People are unhappy with the fact that their worldview is somehow crushed because all these news agencies were saying, yes, Michigan passed this insane law where you go to prison for misusing someone's pronoun. And that's not at all what the law says or does. So I apologize if the acoustics are off a little bit. Like I said, it's a brand new space. Got to dial it in a little bit. I will do that in the next few days. I'll talk to you later. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Progress is man's ability to complicate simplicity.